Hi, today I'm talking to you about my non-fiction to be read list. My to be read list, or TBR list, is really crazy long. I have this real problem where I buy books and then I read books that I've already got, that I've read before, and then I buy more books. And then I don't read the first lot of books that I bought, and then I read some of the second lot of books that I bought, and then I buy more books. I think my predominant issue is that I keep buying books. So yeah, I've got a huge TBR list. So today I'm going to talk about just a small selection of my non-fiction to be read list. So first up is Adult Essence by Gabby Hanna. Now, it says on the back of this book that Gabby Hanna is a web-based comedian and vlogger known for her YouTube channel, The Gabby Show. This is a book of poetry, basically. If you've read The Princess Saves Herself in this one, or any of the Rupi Kapoor books, it's a similar sort of thing. This book has been written and illustrated by Gabby. It's got some really fun stuff in it. The pictures are really cute. There's a dinosaur there. This poem is called Wasted. I'm way more fun drunk, not in like a I'm really fun when I'm drunk kind of way, but more in like a you need to be drunk in order to have fun around me kind of way, which I think describes me perfectly. She could have written that poem about me. So this book came from Waterstones. Pretty pricey, it cost $12.99. Luckily we had lots of points on our Waterstones cards, that wasn't too bad. But yeah, it's just full of lovely poems, really funny cute illustrations. It's right up my street. It's really easy to read. Poetry books are especially easy to just pick up, read a couple of poems, pop down again. So this has only recently made it onto my to be read pile because I only recently bought it. So that's Adult Essence by Gabby Hanna. I'm very excited to read that one. Next up we have a book called Postmortems. This is by Carla Valentine, who is a pathology technician. It's sort of a diary, day in the life of her day kind of thing. It tells you what she does, sort of what it was like, what her job entails. I love stuff like this. I'm really into sort of, not science, but sort of medical history, mental health history. I'm really into sort of the history of surgery and, you know, all that sort of thing, how they came to the conclusions that they come to today. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book. It has a recommended retail price of $8.99, and this edition is published by Little Brown. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. If I look through the pages, it's written a little bit like a story. So some non-fiction books can be tough to read because they're written like textbooks. It makes them a bit boring, really hard to digest. This one appears to be written a bit like a story, so I think it's going to be a lot easier to read and a bit more manageable. So yeah, that's Past Mortems by Carla Valentine. Next up is a book that my hairdresser in my salon recommended to me. I was in there, this is quite a while ago now, a good few months. I think I was still in cast following my operation, and I was reading a book about the history of mental asylums, as you do. She asked what I was reading, I was telling her, and she said that her husband was reading Necropolis by Catherine Arnold. I've got a couple of books by Catherine Arnold, a couple I've already read, and another one that's actually in my to be read list. Necropolis is about London and its dead, basically. So it's sort of a history book, and it tells you about how people were buried, how deaths were managed with, how deaths were dealt with, how plague pits were built in the times of the plague, how some cemeteries in the Victorian times were so overcrowded that the smell, the sheer smell that came from the cemetery was just so overwhelming. You couldn't walk past it, and it wouldn't be unusual to see sort of a couple of bones or arms sticking out of the ground. Yeah, so this I think should be a really interesting read, and basically London is built on layer upon layer upon layer of just filth and death and decay. So I think this will be really interesting too. Again, it's a history book. It's written, the writing is so tiny. And like I already said, non-fiction books can be really hard to get into, really hard to digest. This one does have some little illustrations in it, which are, well, illustrations of the time. They're taken from magazines, they're taken from the newspapers, from portraits, that sort of thing, just to give you an idea. It also touches on sort of the cult of death, the mourning periods, how people mourned, the different types of rituals that people had around death, the superstitions. So I think this will be, again, another really interesting read. I've been putting it off a little bit. It's been on my wish list for months now, and the reason we bought it was that Neil needed to make up the items to get free postage from Amazon, so I just pulled this. It was the first one that was on my list, so I just popped it on, and that was why I bought it. I don't like to read non-fiction books sort of 2-3 in a row. I like to space them in between quite a few fiction books, because as I say, if I'm gonna get out of reading, it's usually when I'm reading a non-fiction book, because I sometimes find them just such a drag to read. So I've been putting this one off a little bit just because of the sheer size of the text and the sheer amount of information that's in it. So whilst I think it will be really good, and Catherine Arnold is a really good writer, she writes in a really humorous way, I have been putting it off a little bit. So that's Necropolis by Catherine Arnold for a recommended retail price of £8.99. Next up is a book by Lucy Worsley. I love Lucy Worsley. If you've ever seen any of her history programmes on TV, you will be as obsessed with her as I am. She gets right into history. She is just a joy to watch. This particular book is, I don't know if it's based on a TV show, but there was a TV show that she did, a documentary series. I think there were 4 episodes on the same subject, and this is basically the book from the series, or the series from the book. I'm not really sure which way it came round. So this is A Very British Murder by Lucy Worsley. It says on the back, ever since the Radcliffe highway murders caused a national panic in Regency England, the British have taken an almost ghoulish pleasure in a good murder. This fascination helped create a whole new world of entertainment, inspiring novels, plays and films, puppet shows, paintings and true crime journalism, as well as an army of fictional detectives who still enthrall us today. A Very British Murder is Lucy Worsley's captivating account of this curious national obsession. It is the tale of dark deeds and guilty pleasures, a riveting investigation into the British soul by one of our finest historians. Yeah, basically, Lucy talks about how murders became not the in thing, but murders spawned a whole host of horror stories, crime stories, fictional detectives. Yeah, and quite a lot of the murderers sort of were inspired by books, and some books were inspired by murderers. I've read quite a few Lucy Worsley books and I have loved them all. She writes in such a fun way that it doesn't feel like a chore to read. It doesn't feel like you're taking in a lot of information, and you can learn such a lot from her books. So yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Again, quite tiny text, but it does have, which we all like a picture in a book, it does have some pictures to sort of help you along with the story, to give you an idea of what she's talking about. So that's really good. This book is published by BBC Books or Random House and has a recommended retail price of £9.99. I am actually quite looking forward to this one, and this might be the next non-fiction book I read, because as I say, I have always really enjoyed Lucy Worsley books. So that's Lucy Worsley, A Very British Murder. So the 5th book on my to be read non-fiction list is 100 Nasty Women of History by Hannah Jewell. Now, I have a link below for a review I wrote a little while ago about a very similar book, which was all about fabulous women, rebel women. So I'll pop that below because that was really great, really easy to read, and I think it was based for little girls really, but I loved it. So I'll pop that link below so you can check it out. This is quite a similar book. So it says on the back, these are the stories of incredible women you've probably never heard of but should have. The women who were too brave and too brilliant and too unconventional, too political and too poor to be recognised by their shrivel-souled contemporaries. The women who were deemed too nasty for their times, too nasty to be recognised, too nasty to be paid for the work, and sometimes too nasty to be allowed to live. It's written by Hannah Jewell, has a recommended retail price of $18.99, and it's published by Hodder Books. It's basically just a collection of stories about different women. So some of the women it features are, let me have a quick look. But this whole there's a chapter here titled Women Who Punched Nazis, metaphorically but also not. And then there's a story about some women that I assume fought the Nazis in some way. There's a section called Women Who Fought Empires and Racists, women who wore trousers and enjoyed terrifying hobbies. And just having a glance through this list, there are 2 or 3 names that I've heard of. Beatrice Potter features in here, which is lovely. Yeah, I don't recognise many of the names, so actually I think this is going to be a really interesting read. I'm looking forward to learning lots of new things about fabulous women. I love fabulous women. I love rebel women, women that have made a difference, women that still make a difference with no recognition. So I think this is going to be fabulously interesting. The chapters seem to be quite small, not more than a couple of pages, so you could easily pick this up, read a chapter, pop it down again. I might read this alongside another book, so I might read a fiction book and then pick this up, read a chapter of this, and then carry on with my fiction book and read it like that, because it's not like you need to remember to follow the story with a non-fiction book. So I think that's what I'll do with this one. I'm very much looking forward to reading this. I've had this one, I think, since before Christmas. It's been sat on my shelf for, so it really is about time that I read it. So that's 100 Nasty Women of History by Hannah Jewell. Next up is my second Catherine Arnold book in my TBR list. This one is called Bedlam, London and It's Mad. I am fascinated by the history of mental health, and I've read a lot of books about the history of mental health. So how people were diagnosed, or not, as the case may be, the treatments that they used to have, the treatments that are still around today, albeit adjusted from the original. There's something I find so fascinating about the history of mental illness, the history of any illness really, the advancements that have been made in science. I just think they're fantastic, and as somebody that has benefited from the advancement of science and benefits now from sort of input and help into my mental health, I just find it fascinating how we've moved on, and I think it's really important to be thankful that this cover is not the normal anymore. So Bedlam, London and It's Mad is a book about Bethlehem Hospital, or Bedlam as it became known, which is the world's oldest psychiatric hospital, and it was founded in 1247 in London. It was sort of a ramshackle, rundown kind of a place to start with, right up into sort of the late Victorian times, the early Edwardian times, when visitors, sort of the rich, would pay to come and watch the mad. They would have a spectators gallery where you could watch mad people and observe them, much like a zoo. So that's nice. Yeah, I think Bedlam by Catherine Arnold is going to be a really interesting read. As I've said earlier, Catherine Arnold writes in a really brilliant way. Her books are really interesting. She puts humour in them. She doesn't make them too much of a chore to read, so that's really nice. It says on the back, Catherine Arnold takes us on a tour of Bedlam and examines London's attitude to madness along the way. From the barbaric exorcisms of the medieval period to the Tudor belief that a roast mouse eaten whole was the cure, we see the reforming zeal of 18th century campaigners and the development of the massive Victorian asylums. This was the era of the private madhouse run by the traders in lunacy who asked no questions and locked up insane and sane alike at the behest of greedy relatives. But it was also the age of the determined reformers who eventually made their way into Bedlam and exposed conditions of terrible deprivation and brutality. It says there about greedy relatives locking up their loved ones. This happened a huge amount. Say for example you wanted to marry a local boy who perhaps wasn't up to your family standards. No problem. Have your dad locked away? Say he's mad. Have him locked away. You're in charge of your own destiny. And it happened all the time. People were locked up for really random reasons. Women were locked up for hysteria because, well, who cares about women? So I have read a couple of other books sort of around the theme of London and Bethlehem Hospital, and I've really enjoyed them. I've really enjoyed the history around it, so I am excited to read this. It's published by Simon & Schuster, or Pocket Books, and it's got a recommended retail price of £8.99. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading Bedlam by Catherine Arnold. The writing, again, pretty small. The chapters, some of them are quite long, so how quickly I'll get through this, I don't know. It's got lots of chapters on all different subjects. A couple of the chapters are titled Mad Women, obviously, Modern Bedlam, The Mirror of Madness. So yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting little read. I'm looking forward to learning more about the history of Bethlehem Hospital. The last book on my to be read list was recommended to me on Instagram. It's called Opening Skinner's Box. It is by Lauren Slater, and it's a book about the great psychological experiments of the 20th century. So on the back it says, a century can be understood in many ways, in terms of its inventions, its crimes, or its art. In Opening Skinner's Box, Lauren Slater sets out to investigate the 20th century through a series of 10 fascinating and sometimes shocking accounts of its key psychological experiments. Starting with the founder of modern scientific experiments, B.F. Skinner, Slater traces the evolution of the last 100 years' most pressing concerns: free will, authoritarianism, violence, conformity, and morality. Previously buried in academic textbooks, these often daring experiments are now seen in their full context and told as stories rich in plot, wit, and character. I think this is going to be a fabulous read. I don't know a lot about this book, really. Just having a quick flick through it. Again, the writing's quite small. It looks like it is written, each experiment is written as a story, so the story from somebody's point of view, which I think will make it really easy to read. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really easy read. It's like, so it's written as each chapter, each sort of experiment is written as a story, so it's not going to be like you're having to take in lots of factual information, lots of facts and figures. I think so it's going to be a lot easier to read. I'm not explaining this book very well, am I? Published by Bloomsbury with a recommended retail price of £9.99. Opening Skinner's Box by Lauren Slater looks like it's going to be another very interesting read. Again, I find sort of psychological history, social history, medical history really interesting, so I think I'm going to really enjoy this book. Yeah, it's been on my to be read list for not that long a time. I only bought it quite recently based on a recommendation from someone, but I think it's going to be quite interesting. I'm glad that I picked up this book. So that is my pretty hefty small sample of my non-fiction to be read list. It's quite heavy actually. As I've said, that's just a small sample. I've got so many books that I need to read, but I thought I'd give you a little look into what is on my shelf at the moment. Collecting dust. Hopefully I will get rid of some of these soon. If you'd like me to review any of them in depth, let me know below. And if you liked my vlog, leave me a like. If you want to know anything more about any of these books, get in touch below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!